I'm here with Denis Newman-Griffis to talk about a lot of things, but in the context of the Framing Responsible AI Implementation and Management Program, which, like the notion of data, sounds like it might be quite dry and boring, let's face it, but actually it's extremely interesting and affects everyone. And we're looking forward to telling you why in a few minutes. Next slide, please. And we'll end with a little teaser. This is not a data as culture artwork. This is an artwork called Cat Royale by the artist Blast Theory. And it's a utopia where cats live in harmony with artificial intelligence. And it raises an awful lot of questions about whether an AI can keep a cat happier than a cat owner. Now, Denis and I have strong feelings about that as cat lovers. But Denis, I'll pass over to you to tell us why we are sharing a pitch from Blast Theory today.
Yes, thank you very much, Hannah. And so I'm delighted to say that here at the University of Sheffield, we are working with the Open Data Institute, as well as with a few other partners. We're working with the British Library, with Sheffield City Council, and with Eviden on the FRAME project, the Framing Responsible AI Implementation and Management project that Hannah showed our excellent website for just a couple of minutes ago. And we are very delighted to be able to announce today that we are partnering with Blast Theory, who are multiple award-winning artists working in a whole variety of media, to investigate to work with them as co-researchers investigating these questions of what we mean by responsible AI. When we talk about responsible AI, what is it that we're talking about, and who is responsible for it? So who's involved, and what does that look like in practice? And being able to work with artists as innovative as Blast Theory, and to be able to work with data as culture and the very strong program that you've just been hearing about really, really interesting work engaging artistic perspectives in data and data in the work of art, is a really fantastic way for us to be exploring what these questions look like about responsible AI and who it's affecting in very human-centered ways.
Brilliant. Well, it would be really great. Thank you for that introduction to Blast Theory. And of course, we are also delighted to be working with them and with you, Denis, and the other partners on the FRAME project. So framing responsible AI might sound a little boring to most people. Could you tell us a bit more about the partners? And as you do, I think it will come clear why this is such important research.
Absolutely. So I'll say that, one of the things that you often encounter in research is that we will put together very dry sounding names for the sake of having a good acronym. And in this case, it was a major part of what we were doing. We wanted to have this idea of a frame project. But really the goal behind it, and the reason that we're working with the partners that we are, is there's a lot of discussion going on about what ethical and responsible use of AI in the world means, how we understand the impacts of growing AI use across many different sectors and many different kinds of applications. And what we really need, that the gap that we really saw that led to this project, is an understanding of how do we understand what responsibility means? How are we framing this discussion of use of AI in practice, and what responsible use means. So we brought together a really cross-sector set of partners. So we have the British Library, who's of course a world leader in cultural heritage and information sector. We're working with Sheffield City Council, who's one of the largest local authorities in England. We're working with Eviden, who is a multinational digital transformation and data firm. And we're working with the ODI, who's of course working across sectors to investigate and really bring together best practice around the use of data in many different areas of policy and work. And so by working with these external partners, and then by bringing together our very interdisciplinary team at the University of Sheffield, so we're bringing together people from the Information School, from the Department of Philosophy, from our university library, many different perspectives coming together to try to understand what is this area of responsible AI, what do we mean, who is involved in it, and how do we make it a bit more tangible in the kind of day-to-day work of people and organizations as we move forward.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, one of the things that's obviously really clear from your discussion is this huge range of different organizations. And of course, that will mean that there's a huge range of languages and expectations and perspectives. And I know that that's been super important to you, is bringing together different perspectives. Why?
Well, AI is increasingly being used everywhere, and it's something that we often talk about AI through a very technical lens of thinking that what AI is it's a technology. It's built by firms, often firms like Google and OpenAI and Microsoft and so on and so forth, and brought to us as products, as things that we pick up and use. But our perspective on AI is really that, for one thing, we're starting to use these systems in increasingly creative ways across all different ways of working, whether it's in professional work where we're using generative AI to help write our emails, whether it's using AI to help drive artistic creation, whether it's looking at data-driven approaches to understanding what is the best policy approach to take. All of these different places, all the different ways that we can work with information are places where we're starting to explore what good use of AI in that space looks like. So to understand AI in practice, we have to bring in those perspectives and those experiences from many, many different areas where it's being used. But more than that, when we think about AI being used, it's not just about the technology. It's also about the humans who are working with it, and it's about the human processes and the human systems of where are we getting the data that we plug into an AI system? What are we doing with what comes out of it? How do we interpret the relationship between people and the technological tools that we use, whether it's AI, whether it's other kind of data systems, whether it's, going back in history, whether it's relating to the plow or the powered loom. These things, these questions about the use of technology are never just technical questions. They're very human-driven questions, and they involve many different aspects of who we are and how we do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the really important points that we want to talk about today, isn't it, together in this conversation, that it's obviously all the people who work in all the organizations are humans, but they are working within the framework of an organization that has an organizational structure and an institutional agenda. And one of the things that we know, which is why we want to bring artists into the mix in conversations like this, is artists are really good at bringing the conversation back down to the lived experience, back down to the human who walks into the British Library looking for a book or an experience, the human who is a service user at Sheffield City Council, for example, or any city council. And that, I know, is something at the heart of this research, is what will be the impact on us as everyday people navigating life, through these decisions.
Yes, exactly. And when we think about, responsible AI and we think about the impacts of AI, it really is about what will the change be? How do we use these things in practice? It's almost the specific technologies that we use are almost the least important part of the equation, where what we're really thinking about is what is it that we're trying to do? What purpose are we trying to serve? And when we think from that perspective, if I, as a person with my history and my perspectives and my views, are coming into the British Library, coming into Sheffield Council, or engaging with the ODI's latest report, thinking about the data technologies that are involved in that, what matters to me in that process? And what will my experience be of working with other people through the medium of this technology? And that kind of question, that's where we see so much potential, and why we were really very excited to be working with data as culture and now working with blast theory to investigate those kinds of questions from that very human-centered perspective. One of the things that we really don't have enough of in the world of AI is stories about what AI means, how we use it, what it looks like in the world. And the power of stories to shape how we perceive the world around us and how we perceive the people who we're working with is tremendous. So we're very excited to be digging into that a little bit on this project.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really matters a lot to me is how we can use data to work with and navigate complexity, the complexity and the messiness of being a human. And I think this is something that all of the artists we've worked with do, whether they do it in a very poetic way or a very bombastic way or a humorous way. You know, we did an exhibition that wasn't on the slideshow called La Mao, Laughing My Ass Off, where we looked at humor in data, and we had artists working with fecal transplant, and we had artists working with the unintelligence of AI systems, and artists recreating some of the internet's most famous memes, like, you know, Ceiling Cat, for example, by Eva and Franco Matos. So, but these are entry points in a way, and these are, you know, an artwork is multiple different things that you can come in that responds to what you bring as a viewer, really. So all art is, you know, experienced differently by every person who brings a different field of experience to it. And I think that one of the fears that people have with data is of being, you know, boxed in. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the really important parts that we wanted to bring to this project and to the experience of working with artistic perspectives, working with our partners, is looking at, you know, what when we work with data systems, when we work with collecting data and processing it with AI and producing more data or producing actions that come out of it, what we're working with is information about people and information about the world. And what we have in a data system and what an AI system is doing is just taking one snapshot, whatever snapshot we choose about the world, and we're saying, this is what we're going to learn about, this is what we're going to operate with, how we're going to make our decisions. Some of the work that I do, not in the context of the Frame project, but some of the work that I do is in the area of AI and disability. And one of the things that we look at a lot in that area is how really questioning how disability and disabled experience and experience of general function in life is represented in data, how we choose to represent that, and how we choose to work with that in collecting data and manipulating it with AI systems. And we can really see in that, you know, in the area of disability, but we can see this much more broadly as well, that the choices we make about how do we represent people and their experiences in data, and what do we do with that to work with those representations, that is where so much of the potential benefit and so much of the risk and potential harm of misuse of AI systems comes from. It's really about how do we want to understand the people who are around us, their experiences, and what we want to do together with them.
Yeah, and also I think the important thing in the disability conversation is that, you know, we're living in a world that has been designed for a very tiny percentage of people that represent a very tiny percentage of experience. One of the projects we did with Data as Culture was we worked with the University of Southampton Data Stories project, and they asked us to work with a community who for whom data might be important. And we were really keen to work with people whose voices at that time we weren't seeing being represented in data conversations. So we worked with Birmingham Open Media and neurodivergent adults in the West Midlands with the artists Harmeet Chagga Khan, Ben Neal, and Edie Jo Murray. And there were several workshops, but the output is an absolutely beautiful physical digital pinball machine, as well as an online mood pinball. It's called Mood Pinball. And in this piece, Edie, who is autistic and neurodivergent, and created glorious visuals for it. The pinball metaphor was chosen as a way of representing the report that we got from a lot of the participants, that being autistic in a neurotypical world can make you feel a bit like an alien, and a pinball field is slightly controllable but slightly not controllable. There's a lot of chance and there's a lot of unexpected things. But this particular pinball machine was designed to respond to the feedback we got from the group, that although the group was clearly a lot of difference within the group, everyone in the group found noise difficult or had hyperacusis. And the city is an area that's very loud, and it can be very, very uncomfortable if you are noise sensitive. And lo and behold, we couldn't find any real open data about noise in cities, which could make life a lot more comfortable for a lot of people in the way they navigate. We synthesized, the scientists at Southampton synthesized some data around noise, and that's embedded at the heart of the game engine. So although this is a piece that's shown at the V&A, it's shown in multiple festivals, Now Play This, at the ODI as well. It's a really serious piece of research that's considering, who the city's made for, who gets to navigate it comfortably and how. And also it's a really beautiful, meditative, lovely experience. But talking about perspectives, as you just have, I think it would be really nice to dig into why, for you, being interdisciplinary with the Frame project is so important. And I'm not just talking about artists and scientists, but you have a really wide range of scientific practitioners and social science people involved in the project. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, we do, and it is really, I think it's a major strength of the project and a key to the kinds of insights that we're already being able to generate and that we'll be generating certainly as the project comes to a conclusion. So we've got, I'm a computer scientist by background, but now working a bit more in a social sciences mode. Colleagues on the project are experts in cultural policy and new media studies, in library and information sciences, in applied philosophy. All of these areas reflect different ways of interacting with AI systems in the world and what their role is and what their impact is. And by being able to bring these very different perspectives and very different professional experiences, ideas of what research looks like, ideas of what we can learn, what we are able to get is a much more multidimensional and a much more holistic overall perspective on what is the role of AI in the world. I mean, we live in the world around us, the social structures around us are determined by many, many different perspectives, many different kinds of expertise, many different kinds of decisions. And so when we're thinking about something like AI that is specifically about processing information and exchanging information between people, we have to be working with that in this very interdisciplinary way where we can understand the different viewpoints on what that means and how we can bring scholarly expertise and academic rigor into it, but also how we can understand what is this going to mean to people.
And how we can translate that into something as fun as watching cats in a utopia. I mean, that is actually really important, isn't it? It's things that make it seem real and believable and unbelievable as well. I think we're coming to the point where we need to see if there are any questions. But I do just want to end by saying one of the really important things building on that with the interdisciplinary is how artists have always held industry to account and not coming from the bottom line. So artists are coming from the very, deep, profound lived experience, aesthetic experience, philosophical, cultural, and ethical experience, and raising those questions. And it just feels so significant to be able to explore this in a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary way with you. But I will turn to Emma, who is not on screen at the moment, but I can see her, and ask if we have any questions.
I'm here now. That was really fascinating. Thanks to both of you. And I just want to make sure that I know we've got lots of colleagues that are taking part in the webinar today and in the periphery. I just want to make sure that somebody's put the websites for both Data as Culture and for the Frame project into the chat, so anyone who wants to find out any more about those can very easily look into it. Okay, so we have a question hot off the press here from Elise Barb, or Barge, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that. So they say, previously you mentioned that there is a real lack of stories in discussions of AI development or around responsible AI. What's one story that you've come across that you found particularly insightful, and what lessons did that teach you around designing tools and data policy and all of those other knotty things? Do you want me to repeat it?
No, that's an excellent question. Thank you for raising that. I think the first story that I would go to is some very well-known work by Virginia Eubanks that was published in a book in 2018, I believe, where she was looking at the use of AI systems in the context of social welfare processes in an eastern part of America, so in the city of Pittsburgh, where I actually used to live. and they were looking at how algorithmic design, like algorithmic processes in determining next steps in child welfare support, were leading to really quite racially biased outcomes in the process of that. And what was told, what she told, and I think part of why it was so effective, was that she didn't just talk about here's what the data were meant to show, here's what they were actually showing, and here's how people were relating to the system. But she really talks through the story of here's where these data are coming from, here's what these services are trying to do, and what the people who are in them, who are working in them, who are engaging with them, what their perspectives are. And by talking through each of these stages of what are people trying to do, where are they getting this data, how do they understand what's coming out of the systems, and what does that lead to downstream, you get this much greater overall perspective on what is the role of AI and algorithmic systems as one part of this much larger and much more complex and much more human whole.
I can build.
Same to you.
Yeah. So we did an exhibition online called Rules of Engagement as part of Data as Culture, which Antonia Roberts guest curated. And this was an exhibition where we were asked to consider from the ODR and R&D team something that might encourage people to think about sustainable data ethics, so ongoing data ethics. And we commissioned the artists Nick Breeze, Everest Pipkin, and A.M. Dark to make new works. They're all online. You can find them via culture.theodi.org. Everest Pipkin created an interactive game which reveals as a story that you click through called Shell Song. And the story in Shell Song touches on many aspects, but the key storyline is that Everest contributed their voice to reading audiobooks for people who are visually impaired, and then found that their voice had been embedded in some of these deep fake voice technologies, and that many people who contribute their voices in these ways don't realize, but their voice print is being, embedded into these systems. And the work really asks the question, what does it feel to be faced with the ghost of your own body through these data systems? Through this beautiful narrative story, it makes you really think about how this technology is being built, how it's being played out, what's permission, what's not permission. And it's just a very engrossing story. Equally, A.M. Dark's piece, Fairly Intelligent.tech, is an online interactive experience where you take on the role of a person being audited by an AI to be the sort of auditor, and it's interviewing you. But what you don't realize is that it has been designed from the perspective of a Black feminist genderqueer scholar whose biases are completely up top, they're completely out there. And as A.M., the artist who invented it, says, if you think that's unfair, you haven't been listening.
Excellent. Thank you. I do want to try and just squeeze one more question in because it's such a good question. And this one comes from Muzan Shikari, and they ask, do you see art adding a human dimension to a highly quantified view of our world, or art creating new ways of datafying the world and new forms of collecting data? Or I guess this is my bit. Is it both?
I was going to say, yes, it's both for me. I think that what we see with data as culture is artists like Julie Freeman, who's identified, 25 data types to apply to ways that you can use data as an art material, as a, piece of her PhD research. But also artists just showing that everything we care about is something that in one way we kind of datafy. We datafy things that we care about. You collect your coins, you might note down how many precious things you have. I don't know. There are many different ways that we collect and work with data, and it's just a human thing. It's not, it's man-made or person-made. I think that's one of the really important things to recognize. Equally, artists are continually and always have seeking to challenge anything that we create, including technological systems that seem to settle on a rigid way of thought, particularly a rigid way of thought that may generate hierarchies that hold people in a position that is unreasonable, unfair, and untenable, really, in a human way. I'm going to say that bold claim.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And Denny, you over to you. You get the last word.
Yes, I would agree. It's definitely both. I mean, the role, the ability of art to help provide that human dimension for the data that we have, for the quantifications that we have, is incredibly important. And to see what those quantifications mean and what their potential impact is. At the same time, similar to what Hannah said, part of the journey is understanding that the data that we have are not the only data that we could have. And art can be a really incredible way of imagining new types of data, new forms of data, new ways of representing people, our experiences, the things that we care about in the world that are driven by what we care about and what we want to do and the kind of world that we want to imagine. And so bringing those new imaginings into actual data is a transformation and a source for radical change in this world of working with data in many ways.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. So Denny and Hannah, thank you.
Thank you.